Ballard. Benefield. Ballinger. Harris. Singer. Staley Berry. Trainier. Frizzalone.
Here.
We also have Mr. Mustis and Mr. Brooks.
All right, thank you. Darren, you want to do the pledge?
Absolutely. Really pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, everybody seems lively today, which is great, because we got our audit process at CAFR coming up, so that should be all awake for next presentation. All right, first up we have the approval of minutes from the June 5th meeting. Moved second. Any questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Under old business, we have discussion of budget for the health department building. I don't think there's anything new we have right now.
No, we're
Still developing. And
we're still tracking on that 25 million.
right. So we'll take that up soon here. Yeah, you can leave that. Do we have any other old business? First thing on new business is a letter from the city of Joliet. And I thought I would just read it. And I read this just about every night before I go to bed. It's fun to hear this one. Dear Mr. Frizzalone, Will County and the city of Joliet together should be impressed and excited by the progress that's been made on the construction side of the new Will County Courthouse. Each day the project progresses rapidly, and I'm looking forward to the day we can all tour the finished facility together. It will be a momentous day for the citizens of Will County and Joliet alike. At the regular meeting of the Joliet City Council on June 19, 2018, it was authorized to make the first annual payment of $500,000 to Will County in accordance with the intergovernmental agreement for the Will County Courthouse project. The check was issued on June 19th. But here's the best line. At the same meeting, the Joliet City Council approved the subsequent 19 payments would be made on or before June 21st for the years 2019 to 2037. The last payment in 2037 will fulfill the city's commitment of $10 million for the project. And that's from David Hills, the city manager. So we're locked in for our $10 million. We got our first check. It's in the bank. I think Karen cashed it like 5 minutes after we got it. Put it in there. But we are locked in, so we know we have that piece to take care of our bonds, some of our bonds.
I was at the Joliet City Council meeting that night, and I tried to get the check, but
they wouldn't give it to you.
They said they'll give it to you.
Oh, well, that was good. But that's great. That's great. Now we're locked in. We don't have to worry about that, and we'll see that money on or about that same time every year. So the next exciting thing we have on our agenda is the audit process in CAFR for fiscal 11/30/2017. Nick and Karen come up. Ooh, you guys got a lot of books. It's not going to go that long, is it?
No.
Karen, that's it.
I'm just going to introduce Nick, and then I'll be quiet. Good morning, everyone. We're lucky enough today to have Nick Cavalieri, our partner with Baker Tilly. Baker Tilly's been our audit firm for approximately 8 years. Nick's here today to talk about our CAFR, which we completed right around May 25th. So he's going to give us a couple highlights and maybe talk a little bit about how the audit process works.
Well, thank you for having me here this morning. Am I on? Yes. There we go. Thank you. So I'll be brief, but if there's questions, I'll be more than happy to take them. Everyone should have received a copy of the county's CAFR. The type of opinion that we were able to render on the financial statements is what you call an unmodified audit opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that the financial statements were prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles and were materially accurate. So that's the same level of assurance that we've been able to render on the county's financial statements in the past 8 years that we've been performing the financial statement audit. So that's good news. The management's discussion and analysis is a set of pages in the CAFR. That's actually a really good read if you wanted a quick synopsis of what took place during the year. There was a new accounting standard that was implemented during the fiscal year as a result of the Accounting Standard Board issuing some new pronouncements. And one of them relates to the fact that there's a other post-employment benefit plan that the county offers for retirees, and that liability that's calculated by an actuary is recorded on your financial statements, on the entity-wide financial statements, as a long-term liability. Previously, that liability was more or less a disclosure and not the same magnitude of the liability being recorded, so that was something that was new. There's some more information in regards to that in Note 9 and Note 18 of financial statements. But ultimately, the county's financial statements appear to be in good order. You see the building will fund moving along nicely, as discussed earlier, and you know, things look to be in good shape. Are there any questions on the actual CAFR itself? Sure.
I just got it in my inbox, so.
Sure. So moving along, there's two other smaller documents. They're under blue cover. The one states report on federal awards. And I'll be brief on this, but the county expends over $750,000 of federal awards. And as a result of that, you're required to have what they call a single audit. And the auditor has to perform an assessment over the programs that you receive funding on, and then pick certain programs to be audited as major programs. And on page 13 of this document, there's a nice summary of the results of our findings, or not our findings, I should say, of our audit procedures. And there were two programs that we audited as major, the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, and then the WEA cluster. And both of those programs we did not have any issues with from a standpoint of controls or compliance. We've rendered unmodified opinions on those programs. So that was in good order as well. And then lastly, there is a document regarding a communication to those charged with governance and management. And this is a report that's required to be issued. The auditor has to have an open lines of communication with the governing body and with management. As part of performing our audit, we do a risk assessment over controls and processes for the purposes of planning and designing our audit approach to render an opinion on the financial statements. If we identify any risks in that process, we'll report those to the management and to the governing body so that they can consider them and weigh options to address them if they choose so. During the audit, we did not identify any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies as defined by the standards. That's good news. That's what you want to hear when the auditor comes out. So ultimately, a clean audit, financial statements, federal awards, and controls over financial reporting. Any questions?
Jim?
You know, you look through these reports, of course, we see a lot of words, a lot of numbers. Some of it is easily understood, some of it is not so easily understood. So tell me, the message to every county board member, the absolute minimum you need to look at here. Is it the management letter? I mean, that they would actually get some kind of sense of what the audit says, or, you know, gives a reflection of the county's finances.
It depends on what a board member would want to give themselves that sense of assurance. The back of the report is full of detail about expenditures on a department level, comparisons from budget to actual. If you want to come way up, the beginning of the report is Nick referred to as the management discussion and analysis. It kind of gives you a little snapshot, mostly focused on the corporate fund. Did revenue go up? Did our fund balance go up? You know, it kind of highlights those more important things. It's only a few pages long.
Is that the one you signed?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're on the hook for that one, right?
Not very exciting reading.
No, there's a lot of stuff in here.
Well, and most of it is there are standards that tell us what has to be addressed in here. So it's not that I just ad-lib it. You know, so it follows a format. After that is the auditor's report, which is a lot of, sorry, Nick, gobbledygook. but it basically says we do a good job. Then I would think the first part, you have your government-wide, so it's everything mushed together. I mean, and then from there, it pulls it apart, more and more and more detail. The notes are also helpful. If you have an interest in debt, the debt note is number 7. If you're interested in Our pension liabilities, that's note 9.
So notes are important.
Yes. There's a whole section in the middle. And actually, I mean, there's a table right in the front, or an index in the front that tells you where everything is.
The reason I'm asking is that, you know, sometimes, you know, I've been looking at these things for 30 years. I mean, so I kind of know where I'm on. You know, which not everyone does, and it's like the highlights, here are the areas that you, minimally you should look at. If you want to say notes or whatever, you know, give a highlight with a sheet on the index page, where things are at, you know.
Sure.
Even though you can read the whole report, but you should minimally look at this.
Well, you know, one thing just to kind of reiterate, I mean, there's different people at different levels of experience with a comprehensive annual financial report. And I can tell you, when you pick this up, it's just too much, right? I mean, but there's a reason for it, because there's a certain level of schedules that have to be presented to be a CAFR, to be a governmental report. And a lot of this is budget to actual schedules that are included for an individual fund. So when you see the sheer volume of this, it's because of all the individual funds that the county operates. But certain funds get rolled up and presented as what they call a major fund. And that's actually, if I was to say, what would I take a look at? I look at page 22, because that's your fund financial statements, and that focuses on your near-term financial results. And what you'll see is you have your revenues at the top, your expenditures in the middle, and then you have this category, other financing sources and uses, which for the most part is being utilized to track transfers between funds that are approved. And then you'll have your net change in your fund balance, where your fund balances were at the start of the year and where you're at the end of the year. And the first thing, before I came today to talk to everyone, I went through this and I looked at this particular schedule, because I think this tells the story is that your general fund ultimately was within $200,000 of being balanced after being transferred. That's your primary operating fund.
So Nick, would you say if you read that first, and then you went through the rest of the document, it will make more sense to you?
Right. So then this schedule will be very high level, and then there's a schedule for budget to actual for each one of these funds that are broken out behind that as well. So then you can get into the details if you were concerned, well, why is there a deficit? So before I came here, I saw, okay, well, you know, of course during the audit, but to refresh myself, I looked and I said, okay, ultimately there was, you know, some deficit spending going on during the year. Well, why was it? Well, that makes total sense. We issued $175 million of bonds, and we're spending that money down. There's work being done on 135th Street, Weber Road, you know, right of ways. So there's a lot of construction going on for the sheriff's facility, the new courthouse, and then you also have road work that's going on. And all of those funds can kind of built up in the prior years that are now being utilized.
Reserved for the projects. And
right, right, and all done within budget and expectations. So this is not necessarily a tailspin of an operational deficit. It's inherent in your operations. This is all capital work, which is consistent with what you typically see in government.
Yeah, so I guess, and this is the first time I've ever really done this, yeah, I think you have somebody who not only hears the audit, but tell us how best to get the information and to read it. But I think it's helpful. Can I ask one other question on these single audits?
Sure.
Now this has changed. I think we got in trouble with this a number of years back, didn't we, with the single audits not being done or whatever?
There were some issues
The
with the
awards.
special funds, I think not. And some accounts that different departments had, bank accounts that we didn't get a report on or something because we didn't know they existed.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
We had moved some accounts that the sheriff managed
Yeah.
outside into the county.
Right.
But they're not grant,
So
they're all
these are-
grant funds.
These are mandated by the federal government, because these are federal funds that were granted to,
To the county.
The county.
So this is a report on expenditures using federal dollars.
okay, so like the health department, for example.
Yes.
Even though they're independent, they're part of our audit, they're part of our budget.
Yes.
So, you know, so if they had federal funds, they would have to do it.
Well, and to go along with your line of what's interesting reading, the CFA is actually done by federal agency. So you can
Okay.
look, if you want to open it to page 6, it'll have the Department of Agriculture,
Right.
and then the grants that fall under that. And more than one department can have a grant from the Department of Agriculture. You know, HUD, the Department of the Interior, the Department of Justice, U.S. Department of Labor. So it goes through and lists them by their overall funding category. And then CAFTA, which is the Catalog of Federal Domestic Awards, I think is the description for it. It'll separate them by that, and then what agency they're passed through. So, I mean, this is some information too, if you're wondering who gets federal funding, this is a good source to look at.
So like CDBG,
Would be,
Would be
I
in there.
believe they get some HUD money.
they get quite a bit of,
Yeah.
all their money comes from the federal government.
Yeah, so the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development is right on page 6. So you can see
Yeah.
community development block.
Okay, thanks.
So some of those programs that you just spoke of are audited as major programs periodically. There's a risk assessment process that we have to follow under the uniform guidance rules. And this year, the 2 programs that we audited as major were the ones that I discussed, but CDBG and the health department, those have been programs that have been audited historically as well.
Well, CDBG, which I'm fairly familiar with, so they have compliance within the agency that is separate from this, correct?
Correct.
And you reflected their compliance with the federal government in your audit?
So the programs that we audited this cycle was not the CDBG program. So we don't render an opinion on that program this particular audit cycle.
Well, I'm just asking though, if there's compliance where there's reporting from an agency, like I'm just using them as an example, there could be others. Probably the health department could have some where they do regular filings for compliance and so forth with the federal agency. Does that reflect when you do them? Or?
So there's when we perform an audit for a major program, the uniform guidance, the Office of Management and Budget publishes on an annual basis this document called the compliance supplement. And you use that compliance supplement in addition to the uniform guidance standards, which I can tell you is massive, and you perform a series of tests and procedures over those areas. And then you're looking for compliance, but then you're also testing the controls to see if the controls are operating. If you identify any matters during your testing, you'll report those at the same time. So then those would be reported from my standpoint as the external auditor who's performing a single audit would be in this document when we were auditing that program. Now there are other agencies that might have compliance visits over your CDBG program. The awarding agencies, sometimes I'll be passed through entities that can come in and do an on-site review, or the actual agency, the federal agency that's passing the monies through can perform their own review. And they might have more things that they're looking for than what I am required to test under my standards.
I do have another question, but let's ask you. I'm getting into the weeds now, so I'll just ask.
Well, but Jim brings up a good point, Karen. It might be worthwhile that once a month when I have these meetings, you bring a different section we can kind of talk about it. You could give us, the breakout. I mean, I know you memorize. I know you memorize this book, so it's easy for you. But I mean, I'm sure everybody would like to learn different pieces of it. And we are going to be talking about. We just had our OPEB meeting. We are going to be talking about GASB 74, 75 and how it affected the reporting of the pension liability, because that is going to start showing up in here. And what's going to happen is it's going to show us long term. You know, we can't still do a 10-year budget, but we can start looking out 10 years and seeing where we're going to be at, which will dictate how we negotiate contracts, how we do everything in the future. Because when you start looking at the long term, and Rashawn did just a 3-year spread, the numbers start moving up pretty fast. And same thing with the pension. So we have to all get better at understanding this, so that when we're voting on an issue like, should this happen, well, maybe it can't. Maybe we can't. Maybe the raises can't be there. But maybe on the other side, there are things that employees are getting that is shown in here as a definite benefit to them. So why don't you and I can talk and we can kind of get everybody up to speed.
If I can make one other comment, because we did have our OPEB meeting this morning, and here is the type of thing we should be discussing. OPEB, which is for basically retirees' health insurance costs. and then we fund them. We basically have, there was a $60 million liability or $65 million liability. We have a $20 million worth of funding. Our annual cost is about $3.5 million. So if you wanted that fund to be self-sustaining, you'd have to have a, endowment of about 60 million or so. And of course that changes. But here is the point I want to make, as I made it at the end of our OPEB meeting. Meaning we the county board, along with our financial folks, and I'll say the executive's office also, we kind of approach OPEB like it's an option. You know what, if we got some money left over, we'll throw it in there. But if you really want to do it correctly, it's not an option. You have to fund it every single year. You don't say, well, if we got some money left over, we'll throw it in there. And then, of course, you have to make a determination of, well, where we'd have to fund it, where it's a, what level do you think we'd have to be at to get to, say, maybe in 15 years, it's all the OPEB, all the post-employment benefits can just be paid down out of that fund. So I guess the point I want to make is, and this is what an audit can help us with. You have these liabilities, you have to fund them, or if you don't, at some point in time, you're going up in the same predicament that the state of Illinois is in. When you're not funding something properly, then how do you think you're going to pay it? You can't. In the state's case, especially after in their case, they borrowed from it, But, and we're always reluctant here because we say, well, once it's put in the OPEB, we can't touch it. We can never take it back. Yeah, that's the point. It's a state too, right? Once it's in, you can't take it out. But you have to really develop and we may not have time to do that this budget because we're getting down to but certainly in the 2020 budget, we have to make a determination of how and what level you're going to fund these things. And we have to let the employees know this is for your benefit. It's not, Mike Frizzlone ain't going to benefit. It's for their benefit. It's money that's been put away on their behalf. But sometimes I think, we don't do a good enough job explaining exactly what we do for our employees, especially in retirement. And I understand when you're 25, 30 years old, that's not on your radar. But anyways, I just want to kind of say an audit really does have implications on how you might want to fund something going forward. I'm just using that as an example. I think that it's a must kind of example. That's all. So that's why it's important that you show us how to understand what an audit says, what good information you can get from an audit going forward. So.
And I was going to say that was, what I thought would be one of the first things moving forward, talk about kind of what we talked about OPEB today, so everybody kind of get up to speed on where we are in that, what the long-term liability is, and how that affects our budget long-term. Okay? Anybody else have any questions?
Just thank you, State of Illinois, for teaching us what not to do.
Yeah. They're good at that.
Sure, yeah. Just do the opposite, you're doing the right thing. Yeah.
Next, you got everybody excited about so now
It's an energizing meeting.
It don't happen very often, does it?
I love it.
I actually do have a question,
Sure.
and I don't think it really pertains to anything the county does, but it is something that perhaps you can answer. If a government entity is spending money inappropriately, for example, let's just say the grant money is supposed to be used for buying milk and we buy eggs, is that something you check on? Do you make sure that the agency that you're doing an audit on is spending the money on the appropriate things, or do you just look for approvals in a budget and approvals for payment of expenditures?
So I'm going to elaborate just a little bit because I think that's a very good question, and I think if it depends on what you're being engaged to perform and if what you're actually testing for. So for instance, if you were doing grant compliance work, like a single audit, and first thing you need to gain an understanding is what are the allowable spends for those dollars. and you would then sample a series of transactions, and then you would look at those transactions for one, controls, that there are controls in place to make sure that they don't spend those dollars on inappropriate things, but then also at the same time test for compliance. Did they in fact buy eggs and not something else, or whatever the case is. So when you're performing a test on a grant, you're looking to make sure that those grant dollars were used for the purpose of that grant. Same thing goes with other things that you might be testing. So like if there were bond dollars that were issued, for instance, and they were to be used for a specific purpose as outlined in the official statement to the bondholders that were purchasing it, you would then, if you sampled the transaction, you would look to see that was charged with bond dollars, was those used for appropriately in accordance with the bond issuance. So yes, absolutely, during an audit, you're looking for all kinds of things.
So corporate fund too?
Yeah, the corporate fund is probably about as loose as it gets necessarily, because it doesn't have as much restriction to it, but then there might be other funds that would have more restrictions placed onto them as to the purpose of those dollars that can be spent. Yeah.
And Jackie, our auditor, is charged with some of those same things as well. He's looking at what's being spent over budget and who's going over budget. There is some, is it appropriate, where the expense is going, so that our auditor is doing that as well on a day-to-day basis. But, Glenn?
You know, to follow up on Jackie's question though, I mean, where is compliance, say like in a grant, that's one of them. My concern is, and you know, and I think one of the things Jackie also maybe wanted to be more directly answer, not that I'm trying to be a mind reader here, but our problem is with special funds here. I'm talking about from a county perspective. You know, we created all these special funds, which are of concern to me. And are they using them correctly? Do we even need a special fund? And one of the areas that I would really like to get into, and you know, some special funds are created by necessity. In other words, it's a grant or whatever. But many of our special funds were created by the county board. In some cases, way before even I got here. And I've been around for a while. And
Before you?
yes, it was like before me. And even while I've been around, we've created these special funds. But I do have concerns, especially when special funds kind of get off grid. You know, they got their own checking accounts, they're not going through our normal procedures in the county. Those are a real concern to me. And, you know, I think that, you know, I don't know how much we've asked you, Nick, to do, but I think we really need to take a hard look at those special funds that we created that are not there because, you know, the federal government said you will create a special fund for this. Quite honestly, I see very little need for special funds, but we have a lot of them, and you know, some I understand if they're foreclosure or seizure funds. I understand the state's attorney has that in a special fund, and there's a guideline by, I guess, the federal government on those. But those that aren't set up to have like federal guidelines or state guidelines, I have some real concern.
Well, I think one of the things that, you know, we have a lot of funds, but I think you also made a little bit of a reference to maybe offline accounts that, and I wouldn't say offline accounts, they're money that doesn't belong to the county, that's managed by departments, not necessarily special funds. There is a new GASB coming out that's we're gonna be required to reevaluate those.
Good.
If they're not, if they don't meet the fiduciary standard, then they'll have to be pulled into the county. So that will we will be doing. As far as the funds we use, there are a handful that are now not being used, and we need to find a process to close. Well, I don't know that we can eliminate them if they have activity, but we can inactivate them with some board action.
Well, Mary, I would ask things like, can we take those special funds and just, you know, the function exists, it just goes to the corporate fund.
Yeah, well, it depends upon, because some of them are dedicated funds, and we've had some conversations with Karen about some possible uses for some of those funds. So we'll continue to.
That's not the first time I've thought about I'll bring it up again.
We talked about
We'll keep working.
it. Great.
Especially if they haven't done anything in years, as well, for years.
See, like you bring that up, like once a year, yeah, but we haven't really brought them on that.
Ken, did you have a
No
question?
progress.
Yeah.
So Nick, next year you better come here loaded for bear, because after Karen gets through with audit 101 with us, we'll have tons more
What
questions.
have we done?
I'll prepare for an extra hour.
Yeah,
Maybe Nick, you can actually hold something for us. We'll have an auto 101.
I'm happy to come and talk shop anytime.
right. All right, great. Thanks.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Nick. Thanks, Karen. All right, next up, designating First Secure Community Bank Joliet as a county depository. Moved in second. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. And finally, authorize the county executive to execute necessary documents for delinquent tax program. Moved in second. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. I don't think we have any other new business. Any public comment? Oh, Gloria, sorry, missed you.
I do have a question.
Sure.
Last week, there was some publication about a 1% sales tax with schools. Do we know anywhere, do we have any idea where this
Yeah,
originated from? And
Yeah,
what's
so,
going on
and it's been misquoted in the paper about Will County doing it, like it means us. So what has happened is the state authorized county schools that if 51% of the school districts voted in the affirmative, that they could go out for a referendum for a 1% sales tax. That would be on counties, municipality, wherever sales tax is being collected. For capital projects at the schools only, would not be going for operations. Of course, you know, it's a little bit of a shell game because you just move money that you were using initially for capital that wasn't designated, and now you move it back into operations and you put this money in there. So last week or week and a half ago, I forget who the final district was, if it was out Plainfield, Aurora, somewhere out that way, voted in the affirmative, put it over 51%. You know, school districts like Homer 33C did not vote against it, but they got the 51%. So that will be a referendum now on the ballot, and if it is passed, then the school districts will get an additional 1% on every sales tax wherever it's being collected. And that money will go directly to the schools. And it will be broken out by population, by school.
But have we seen any documentation of the exact wording of the referendum?
No.
Can we
It'll
get
be
that?
in the clerk's office.
Yeah, I don't think it's there yet because they just got the pass. But I'm sure there was some general, because I think several of the counties, especially the counties downstate, were big behind this because they were looking for a way, you know, how do we get some revenue to build, you know, our aging schools when we don't have the population as much.
We don't have the property taxes on.
Right, and they don't have the taxes that we have up here, the crazy taxes we have up here. So they're the ones that kind of started pushing this. I think all the downstate counties had voted for it, were pushed up there. And up here, it was kind of hit and miss on what school district voted for, what against. Like I said, Homer 33C, Steve in our district, I know that they voted against it.
Was just the board that voted?
Yeah, so it's a board. The board had a vote to say they were in the affirmative, that they would like to go forward with the referendum.
When the schools opted out, as in our area, me and Mike's district, District 92 is the only one that didn't decide that. The rest opted out. But now if this passes in Will County, they still get
Right, they're not
they don't
opting
opt out
out.
of the benefit of
Right.
it. They just opt, they say they didn't want to do it.
And then, like I said, it'd be by population of school district, how the money gets divided.
So we need to be real clear about that, that just by opting out doesn't eliminate that tax from happening.
Right, but I think it's important for our constituents, for everybody out there to understand, it's not us trying to do this, this is the school districts.
State of Illinois gave them the
The authority, and
And
so,
the school districts have to do it. And to answer, you know, the superintendent, Sean Walsh, superintendent of schools will probably have the exact, and I don't know, the clerk will get it. I don't know when the last day they put it in to get it to the clerk's office. But Sean should have that.
yeah,
Soon. She should have it soon.
right? Any other questions? Any other comment? I don't have a report, no executive session, I believe. All right, so motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried, thank you.
I know.